Yeah, hello, and welcome back for episode two. It's taken me a little bit of time, and this week we're going for that number two, the difficult second album. But really, just wanted to thank first of all those folks who did sit through all of my last session. I hope you got a little bit from it, and feel free to add questions and ask in the comments. But also subscribing is great, so thank you very much for those. It's taken me a little bit of time because I've been fairly busy with stuff with work, but I just wanted to sort of walk you through what we've been doing and what I've been thinking about within my experimentation with MCP and with the agentic world. So let's crack into it. Thought today I'd really run through front a little bit of stuff on agents in AI governance. So last week we spent a bit of time, showing what MCP was and how it kind of hangs together. But today I want to spend a couple of minutes just on how I think we might be able to use agents inside of AI governance. And then I really want to do some practical updates, what I've been doing, how I've been playing around and experimenting with the old MCP server. So let's kind of crack our way into it. And with no further ado, I think when we start looking at agents in AI governance, the way I've liked to sort of think about that is to really I've broken down to the types of areas in the process where you might see agents being valuable. So I'll sort of walk our way across these. And again, this is only going to be really high level and again, more prompting discussion, hopefully. But really, I think we can see agents maybe inside of AI governance tooling to do workflow management and sort of help navigate and sort of deal with the sometimes different concepts people might have, find me information about policies, maybe also do orchestration, coordination of multiple agents, but also allow us to do things like navigation, search, etc. We might think about them also in areas like onboarding, where you've got lots of people saying, "I want to build out an AI use case. How do I do that? What do I need to be doing it? How can I draw upon that work that's been done by those people ahead of me? How can I stand on their shoulders and move forward?" So I kind of like the idea of being able to use agents there to really add more of a conversational dialogue to an ad hoc user. As we move across, you think compliance planning, quite interesting there, where you might think about an agent helping a compliance specialist being their sort of their assistant, go through, review evidence, help describe information, or to even interpret regulation, troll through news articles, etc. Try and find information out. So again, that sort of agent and assistant to be on the right hand shoulder of your compliance expert. And similarly, I think in the risk assessment space, looking at the key information we've gathered throughout that AI governance process and think, well, what have we got here, and how can I maybe the agent help you do assessing of items, making recommendations? Always want a human in the loop, obviously, but being able to really guide an SME to go through that sign off process, often really powerful. We get down to the bottom layer here, we've got things like monitoring and events. I think this is more of an autonomous agent that just happens to be working in the background, understanding where things have moved on and where they've changed and what needs to happen to then drive some other system interaction. So again, these are more independent agents that I think will be really powerful for the organization. Again, we're going to work out what we're going to try and build as we move our way forward. We'll talk about doing audits and reports and communications, the idea of using an agent to pull together key information in a consumable way for people to work with. And then I really think there's a lot of value as well. It's not just in the AI governance space, but in third-party risk overall, about how you could use an agentic approach to do that third-party analysis and governance that you often get. If you're working with a cloud vendor, they'll provide you with SOC 2 information, or their policies, or their documents around their controls. Again, having a piece of AI that can go through and an agent that can go through and analyze that information, come up with key information, working out maybe there's a delta between their policy and your policy to work out where there's a difference. Again, just try to think about those sorts of areas. So again, I think when we move our way into this, and I'm starting to build out, I'm really probably going to start up here in the top left in this idea of navigation and work, and a little bit of work around could I use things in onboarding. They're probably my first, I think they're probably the easiest stabs. Are often a conversational element where we're just looking at information, bringing data back. So I think that's going to be a nice, simple space, but I think we'll evolve and move into those. So I'd really, again, if folks have got different ideas and want me to pile in some of the others first, let me know and we can kind of work our way through. So again, super high level, just trying to get through with some pace today to kind of get you started. Now, if we then really get into what I've actually been doing, I mentioned last week I was using the OpenPages MCP tools. That MCP tool, it was great. We managed to make it go and query, find me an issue. The way in this first release for the MCP tools that I found from OpenPages and the documentation, it's really about using those API calls that are native to the application. And they're almost the object level API calls, things like querying, finding me information, creating, so adding a new object to the system, and then associating it to an appropriate parent, doing updates, so finding an object, so that combination of query and an update, so editing something that's already in place, and obviously things like delete. So again, this first pass is really using those sort of core areas, and again, if you look at those, it's it could be create, read, update, delete for CRUD if those of you have played around in that space before as well. But just wanted to think about that as well. That's where I've started, and I'm really last week we did a bit of work on query. Today I'm going to show you some query, some create, and we could do update as well depending on how much time we've got. So again, just wanted that thing on the table. We move along. One of the things I mentioned before is the object type. So again, the underpinning of the What's Next governance tool that I'm using here is the OpenPages platform, which is really an object-based GRC platform. The MCP structure comes natively with sort of 3 object types in this file called object-types.json. This is really a definition of where you'll then start it configures the MCP configuration, creates tools on those create, read, update, and delete. It takes that information and says, all right, let's create a new tool for each object that is listed inside of this object types. Now, again, I think every user of the OpenPages platform is going to have their own structure about their object types. This is just a way, in this case here, for the MCP server to know it's going to actually generate the tools using the API, but it's going to base it around the definition that's in here. So again, I'll actually, let's spend a bit of time if I can. I'll show you an example. So here you'll see it'll give you the type. I extended this to say let's include models, and it gave those elements. So again, the scheme that they need in this toolkit would be type ID. The tool prefix is what it's going to be used inside of the MCP server as the tool. The display name, a path prefix, and then one they've got is a fairly standardized one. They've got a status field that will differ depending on the objects and any implementation. But again, it's just another way of looking and sort of adding some information so you can think about the way that those things will be important. Because when you start doing, creating objects or querying objects, let's say, show me all of the open issues or give me all the models by status as an example. And this really helps us sort of give the tool some sort of instructions on the way through. Now, when we think about instructions, that's really powerful. Actually, before we even do that, let's actually go and have a look if we can now. And we'll have a look here. This is the object types JSON. And again, just so you're kind of aware, it came with controls, issues, and risks. It was out of the box. And I've added some others in here. I've added in register, which is the use case object in this instance. We've got models. I've added compliance plans with their fields. And I've added in entities. So just 3 or 4 different object types. Obviously, you'll extend it for anything that you might have. But again, in this way, again, in general, I think having this idea of a MCP server and documentation to generate the tools is very powerful. And this is a good way of us being able to find a sort of a standardized approach to working out which tools to generate and for which object type. So giving some definition. Now, I mentioned before, doing things like adding a status field helps us give some level of instruction. But ultimately, inside of our agent, there is something we really should be thinking about, which is giving it some actual instructions. Okay, so it's not just a user fires a question to an LLM and back. We need to give it some context, something to work around, some effectively a job description for the agent to carry out. And we look at that. If I can find it here, what we're going to see here is some instructions. So inside of Langflow, I added an agent object. In this case, here, as I mentioned, I was using OpenAI with GPT-4.1, etc. And there was some information. And default, it says something like, you are a helpful assistant. I'll show you how I've updated that. But essentially, the instruction here is really important. It's effectively telling us, in this case, as I mentioned, who the agent is, what it's going to be responsible, and what type of behaviors it should carry out. We're looking at the agent's role. So in this case here, it might be you're a compliance assessment, you might be involved in workflow, or you're a helpful assistant. Tells what it should do and also what it shouldn't do. So you can put some barriers and some, I won't say guardrails is a very specific thing, obviously, in AI governance, but some idea of pathways around parameters it should operate within. You can also add in things, I really like this idea of giving it specific decision-making styles. Think for your organization. Do I want it to be, active? Do I want it to be very aggressive in its nature? Do I want it to be risk averse? These are things that you can think about and saying, actually, I really want to make sure that do I want it to be very creative if it's looking to do things? So you can really give it some guidance and really bring it all the way through. But essentially, as I mentioned here, if the model is the brain that you're working inside of your agentic approach, the instruction inside of your agent is the job description that brain needs to work within, needs to follow. So I think it's a really powerful set of instructions. And you'll see here, this is the inside of the MCP documentation. There's one that they give us. I wanted to just show you in this case here, the blue is the general items that are there, and you'll see I've added in some extras, but I've added in some of those new tools. So out of the box, it said things like for OpenPages MCP, create issue, use update issue, use query issues, issue, etc. I've added in some of those other objects, register, model, compliance plan, business entity, and those others were there. You'll also see I've added in some other items here, which I think just will help us later on as well. So things like when using any of the tools for create, e.g. create control, please check for mandatory fields on the object and display a list. And then when using create tools, check for duplicates and notify the user. A duplicate is something that has the same or similar description. Respond by showing details of the existing object. Again, you could give it more and more boundaries. I wanted to give it something very simple in this case here, and it will also give you some other instructions that were there. Ultimately, we'll go into this in a moment's time. A good instruction will make the agent better. So a good instruction equals good agent. Effectively, we're trying to say to the agent, who are you? What's your primary task? What inputs do you expect? What outputs you should produce? And what rules and boundaries must you follow? So again, a fairly simple way, but I like to break it down that way accordingly. So let's get into the agent now and take a bit of a look at what we've been doing. And again, I haven't had huge amounts of time, as I mentioned this week. It's been fairly busy. But what I'll do is just hopefully, he says that famous last words. Let's move this onto the right screen. Okay. And you'll see here, and again, just remembering for those, going back, I was using the OpenPages local MCP server, and things like those instructions I mentioned earlier, the object types are all in here. The instructions are also, if we scroll down a little bit here, you'll see your instructions are eventually down here. We'll get there. Integration, but you'll see some instructions inside of the documentation. This is your behavior section, what you need to do effectively for the agent. So that good instruction makes it very easy for the agent to operate. So again, nothing to do that too much today, but just that's how I've been using it. So you'll see here, and again, just so you're aware, inside of Langflow where that fits, obviously you'll see my different elements. So our tools now, we only had 4 before, but as I've restarted my MCP server and refreshed that MCP server, you'll see that the actions effectively actions or tools that can be carried out here inside of this MCP tool, create control, update control, etc. But you'll see and 25 more. These 25 more are essentially all those. Every time you add a new object type, in this case here, it's going to add a create, an update, a query, and delete for that object type. So again, I had a few. We just kept extending it. So really, really powerful piece to use there, but helpful. And then we get into agent instructions. Again, if we look at the instructions here, those are the ones I just showed you on screen. This is where you would put your guidance in. Again, these can be quite verbose, but again, trying to think of it in the easiest way possible, make it clean. Think of it in the same way you've probably done prompt engineering before. Clean guidance, breaking it down, numbered sections. The models like to work in that way, and it helps on the way through. Okay, so, and then we've got obviously in our simple agent we've been working on, we have our tools, we have our agent. And because it's our MCP structure, we have a chat input we dragged in. So I just grabbed an input, which is our chat input. So we'll have a screen, and then we'll also, the agent will then use this chat output for displaying our piece. So as we get information out. So let's go ahead into the playground, and you'll see some examples here. But let's go to a brand new one here on the way through. You'll see a new chat. Again, this is just to try this out so I can see things here. So I mentioned before, we could do things like, we've extended now. Last week we did the just show me how many issues I have. This time around I might say count how many use cases are in system. Okay, again, just so we can kind of see what's going on here. The agent, in this case here, it's using our query. So again, that's one we use, but you see now it's got query use case. We didn't have that last time around. So again, it'll just give it a moment, hopefully. And you'll see here, it came back with a decent payload, but you'll see it's found this, and then it gives you a nice, there are a total of 35 use cases in the system, okay? Show me the use cases by status. Let's see how we get on. And again, we might have to give it some more instructions, maybe say query or update me, but we'll see what happens here. So again, taking a few moments time. and we can see what's going on. In this case here, there are 24 approved, and you'll see if I just crop that down a little bit, you'll start seeing it's going to give me the list of the 24. Again, I gave it all of them, so it's going to now go through each status group, and it's going to give me information and quite a lot around them. So you'll see here there are 5 proposed, 2 here that are awaiting approval, 1 rejected, 1 decommissioned, and a bunch that were approved. So again, pretty useful. And if we look here, we went, actually I've got 5 that are proposed. We'll be able to go into, in this case here, our AI governance tooling. If I go into here and do use cases, and if I looked at those, you'll see I've got by different statuses here and approved. Let's go the other way around, which ones we're after here. Let's have a quick look. We can see I've got a few that are proposed here, and I can also just double check and make sure that I've got them all. And yeah, so I've got a goes on the way through. So I've got 1 that rejected. If we went back to our output here, it was our facial recognition rejected. So again, we know we're getting the right information back. So now we're seeing we've extended our MCP server with new tools. And we've also then used the query and it's bringing back other elements, so other metadata about those items. So we've done query. Okay, so it's shown me I can do some search, kind of useful, but actually wouldn't it be nice also that the system could do using some of those other tools? So let's have a quick go at one of those. And I've just got a very simple, I don't want to keep typing this for us. Create a new issue called issue with a description of Ian's issue. It should be associated to the High Oaks entity. Now in this case here, because what we're actually doing is we're asking it to do 2 things. We're going to ask the tooling, because we're doing a creation, we're going to say create new object, but also associate it to the High Oaks entity. So effectively, we're going to be doing a query, hopefully, of the entities, and we'll also do some creation work. Okay, so let's have a look at doing that now. Okay, so you see the first thing it's doing, and even though the associated High Oaks is at the end, you'll see it's actually doing a first thing it did was go ahead, and we can scroll up a little bit here. First thing it did was executed a query for business entities. It pulled back. Yes, there was one called High Oaks Bank. It found one business entity, which is great, and then it executed the create issue. It called it Ian's issue, and we've got some output. And it says here it's created that issue, etc., etc. We can see all the right information. Again, taking that little step further, if I go into High Oaks Bank here, and I look at my tree diagram, you'll see I've got an issue, which is great news, and it's called issue, and kept it really simple, this obviously for today. But if I look at that issue as well, you'll see it created Ian's issue. Okay, nice and easy. That's good. Let's just try 2 more things I think might be interesting for us. So again, taking it that step further, if I said the same instruction, create a new issue called issue with a description of Ian's issue, let's see what happens here. So again, same process. It's looking through, querying the entity. Now it's querying the issues just to make sure there isn't one. And look, by the way, it's gone, actually, it looks like there's already an issue here with the issue in the system. Here are the details. So in this case here, that followed that instruction that I added in that said if there's a duplicate, because we don't want to keep adding in, especially if you might have an incident, an outage, or 2 or 3 keen people in the team trying to add information to the system. We want to make sure that we're not duplicating content as it moves through that cycle. So nice and helpful in the way here. Like say no thanks. Please, here's one more try, and this one I haven't experimented with at all. Please update the status of which was one called? It was called Ian's issue. Now again, this will see how the query works. Okay, and you'll see here it moved it to a status of closed. So again, it updated the right information and moved it all the way through. So again, just wanted to kind of show you now we can start thinking about, if I hopefully look at my issue again, we will see. We've got an open there, we'll have to go back and double check what it's updated. So again, the idea here is that we can test this out, but the idea is that Langflow in this case here will be doing those next pieces. So hopefully next video we're going to actually do a lot more. We're actually going to start thinking about some of those use cases that I mentioned early on. So if we go back up to here, I want to maybe do some work with navigation and work management. So let's start with doing something around querying and adding some information and maybe doing some onboarding. So building maybe a 2-step agent that's going to do a number of different activities, as well as maybe bringing in some information, training materials, etc., to kind of help guide our user as well. So again, hopefully that's not been too painful too long for you. Any questions, always feel free to add me into comment on this in LinkedIn or to comment on YouTube, add questions. I'm more than happy to get in touch with folks and kind of work our way through this. But hope you're enjoying this, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.